I feel like it's been ages since I filmed a sit-down video. Hi friends and welcome back to my channel. I'm here again. It's time for me to film my January wrap-up. January was a really good reading month for me. I had a great start to the reading year, so that is very exciting. In January I read 7 books. I had a few books I needed to read for different read-alongs. I also low-key tried to participate in one readathon. I said 2 in my TBR, it ended up being 1. Nevertheless, read a bunch of great books. So let's just talk about them. But first, let's have a look at these stats. So if you consider audience, all of the books, all 7 of them, were targeted towards adults. I know that there was 1 month last year when I only read adult books for 1 month, and I was not as excited about my reading that month. It did not go as well, and that's when I sort of realized that, perhaps it is good to try and mix in a few YAs, potentially middle grades, just to some diversity, have a different flow with the reading. But for some reason it worked this month, so I'm not gonna complain about all of my reads only being targeted towards adults, because I really enjoyed all of my reads. If we look at format, 4 of the books I read were physical books, 1 book was an ebook, and 2 books were audiobooks. So I'm actually getting back into audiobooks, which is really cool. And I'm also glad that I'm reading a bunch of physical books. Only 2 of these were from my actual physical TBR. 1 was a reread and 1 was a library book. If we're considering my book buying game, not so much advancement in that department, only 2 books read so far, but still. If you look at genre, 3 books were fantasy books, 1 book was a contemporary, 2 books were thrillers, and 1 book was a sci-fi. I'm really glad with the spread of genre this month. Like, it's not too far spread out. I had multiple books in multiple genres, but I still had a good variety of genres. And I read some genres I don't normally read, such as thrillers and sci-fi, so that is quite exciting. And finally, if we have a look at rating, 2 books I gave 3 stars, 4 books I gave 4 stars, and 1 book I gave 5 stars. It was a very good reading month for me. Many of these books were also like 3.5, 4.5, but in this chart, in this system that I use in my wrap-ups, I only keep them at whole stars. Let's just start talking about the books. Usually I talk about them in chronological order, meaning the order that I read them, but in January I read 3 fantasies, and not only 3 fantasies, but all of those fantasies are first books in adult fantasy series. So I thought that, hey, might as well compare them. These are the 3 fantasy books I read in January: The Rage of Dragons by Emma Winter, Jade City by Fonda Lee, and The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I have tabbed all of them. This is so much fun to see that I'm tabbing them. I love that. The Poppy War was a reread for me. I read it for the Poppy War read-along that is currently going on. In February we are reading The Dragon Republic, so if you are interested to join us, I will leave some links in the description. But since this was a reread, I'm sort of excluding this from the current discussion, I guess. I will talk more about these 2 now, but I'll get back to Poppy War soon. These 2 books were first reads for me, first time I read them. Let's start by talking about The Rage of Dragons. This was actually a rollover from December for me. I started this in December and I finished it in January, but I'm counting it towards my January TBR. That's just typically how it goes in like my spreadsheets and on Goodreads and all of that. Rage of Dragons. This story follows Tao. He is a sweet, nice, kind boy from a small village who's sort of, I guess, a peasant. He doesn't really have any money, he doesn't really have a special name, anything like that. In their world, basically everyone goes to the military, that's their thing. And he doesn't want to go to the military, he wants to marry the girl he loves. So he sort of plans this entire thing of how he's gonna do the test to join the military, but then avoid that entire thing. Things changes, something happens that makes him want to enlist, that makes him abandon his plans, and instead he wants to become the greatest warrior of all time. It's so good, it's so freaking good. Like, I'm describing it in the worst possible way, but it's a vengeance story. We have Tao, he's nobody, he's nothing, he's not the best, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, but he wants to become the best, and he really works for it. I just love those sort of like underdog sort of stories. Also, there are some, of course, fantasy elements to this story. It's not only the world and the military aspect, but it's also every 100 man can sort of transform into a bigger, greater, stronger version of themselves. And also every 1,000 women has the capability of calling dragons. That's a very bad description of the plot, but what I can say instead is that it's quite a character-driven story, which I personally love. You will get to know Tao, you will get to know his friends, his combat mates, his group, his team, the girl he loves, all of that. You will also see his struggles, all of the military struggles, how hard he works to truly become the best and survive. And also there's so many discussions about the unfairness in this society, about injustice between the upper class and lower class. I have so much to say about this, honestly. Like, I really enjoyed this one. There's so much I enjoyed. It looks intimidating, it sounds intimidating, it sounds like a ooh, brawly, cool, adult fantasy, fighting. No, it's not. It's a really good book, and I really appreciated the writing because it was really approachable. You understand the story right from the beginning. Perhaps not all the details regarding the magic system and like the different and the glossary and stuff. Apparently there's a glossary in this book. I missed that. But yeah, there's also a glossary at the end of the books, which can really help you out. It's not so hard to get into the story for me. You get to know the character quite early on. You get to appreciate them. You get to appreciate his journey. Did I write anything? Yeah, straight into the action. Also a lot of world building. It's also a feminist book. That's something I found very interesting. It's a very feminist book in many ways. There's a queen that leads the nation, not a king. When people marry, the partner takes the woman's last name, not the man's last name, which I found really interesting. It's just thrown in there like a tiny detail. It's like the woman's name that is important. No one really cares about the man's name and the man's status. It's all about the women's status. Of course, in the actual military combat setting, it's mostly dudes fighting. There's a lot of characters, but you do get to know them. It's also quite, as I said, it's easy to get into, easy to read. Yeah, I like the characters a lot. I like the main character. Wow, I liked him. He was cool, interesting. It turns very grimdark. There's a lot of themes regarding right versus wrong, bravery, being a coward, and also, as I said, upper class versus lower class, nobles versus lessers, as they are called. I really enjoyed this book. This book definitely ignited a new excitement for me when it comes to adult fantasies. I feel like I haven't really read so many these last few months, and this book definitely picked up that interest again. I have said it before, I do really enjoy like military strategy sort of fantasies. It was so good, it was so solid, so strong. But it's not a complete 5-star. A lot of the book is purely only, I would say 90% of the book is only combat and fight scenes. That's the entire thing. Like, he has to fight his way up in the military because you need to go through all of these different competitions to become the protector of the queen or something like that. And there's just basically only fighting. If they're not fighting in a match, they are practicing. If they're not practicing, they are fighting in an actual battle. 90% of the book is combat scenes. You don't need to be the biggest fan of combat scenes to appreciate this. I appreciated it, and I'm not someone that really cares about, oh, the sword went that way, and then they speared him, and then there's a shield, and then there's a... I don't care that much, but I still enjoy this book. So I'm not saying that you will be put off if you are not the biggest fan of combat scenes, but if you know it's something you truly loathe or are easily bored by, perhaps this book is not for you. And because of that, I did find this book a tad bit repetitive. I also would have loved to see more strategy talk in it, but I do feel like this book is definitely setting up for more strategy and political talk in the sequel, which I'm very excited about. I first gave this 4 stars, but I have continued to think about it, and I also later on read Jade City, and I'm gonna say it now, I can't really pick a favorite between these two, so to spoil this review, I gave this 4.5 stars. I'm so excited to get to the second book. I'm convinced that the second book will actually be 5 stars because I now know the characters, I know the world. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, looks intimidating, sounds intimidating, is not as intimidating as you would think. Second adult fantasy I read in January was Jade City by Fonda Lee. This series has been very popular, I feel like, but it's definitely becoming even more popular this year, which is great. I'm so excited to continue with the series. I am afraid of what might happen in the future books, to be honest. I'm also aiming to finish all of the 3 books within the first 3 months of the year. We'll see if I'll be able to do that. Jade City, what is this? This is basically about gangster clans in a fantasy Hong Kong, I think. An epic drama reminiscent of the best classic Hong Kong gangster films, but taking place in a fantasy metropolis. Basically, we are following characters in a family, in a clan. This family and this clan rules certain parts of the town where they are, and then there's another clan that rules other parts, and they have constant fights and battles. And another important thing in this story is Jade. For some people, they can connect to the Jade, and when they do, they can become stronger, faster, have a better perception of things. Basically, their skills becomes improved when they have Jade and can handle that Jade. Jade is very important. It's important in trade, it's important in business, and that's also one of the conflicts between the different clans in the city, wherever they are. Janloon is the city. Jade is the lifeblood of the city of Janloon, a stone that enhances a warrior's natural strength and speed. I found this book a bit tricky to get into at first. I definitely got into Rage of Dragons a lot quicker than I did with Jade City. So it's a bit confusing at first, but soon enough you will start to get into it, you will understand how things works. But I never really felt like deeply connected to the story. I would put the book aside and I would not feel this need to instantly pick it back up again. So you can imagine my surprise when this book kind of made me cry at 50%. This book made a thing where it crushed my heart that I did not even know that it was holding. That happened during a live show. I so did not expect this because I did not understand that I had gotten attached to the characters. Yeah, sure, the characters are cool, I like their archetypes, but I did not understand just how much I cared until I actually realized how much I cared, and it just crept up on me. I had no freaking clue, and after that I was hooked. I was so conflicted because most books that have made me cried or made me cried or broken my heart or made me very teary-eyed, I've given 5 stars. But there's just something about this that makes it so I can't give it a full 5 stars. Perhaps because it is a bit trickier to get into. So I wanted to give this 4.5. But that's when I realized, well, if I'm giving this 4.5, I need to give this 4.5. So that's where I'm at. Both of these books are 4.5 stars. Both are incredible first books in fantasy series. I'm so impressed by both of them. I enjoy them so much. I'm so excited to continue to read a lot of fantasy this year. Yes, they are chunky. Yes, they look intimidating. But trust me, you will get into them. This one is a bit easier to get into, but as I said, it has a lot of combat and fight scenes that you might not enjoy. This one is more politics, which I personally like, but a bit of a trickier story, trickier world to get into, I feel like, compared to this one. I might be the only one with this opinion, let me know. Both of these are also quite dark, a lot of grey morality, a bit grimdark, and I appreciate that so much because I'm so weak for that freaking shit. Perhaps this one is a tad bit more a favorite compared to this one. 0.05 more than this in rating, or something along those lines. Like, they're very equal to me, but there's just something like my heart, I don't know, it just sings a bit more for this book, I guess. If you're looking for a new adult fantasy series to start, check these two out because they are that good. Now for the third fantasy series I read in January, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a reread for me. I'm reading it for the Poppy War read-along that I'm co-hosting together with Jane, Lorena and Megan. As I said, links will be down below. It's a reread. First time I read it, I gave it 5 stars. And now the second time I read it, I gave it 5 stars. Right from the first chapter, I just instantly understood why this is my favorite fantasy. Like, it grabs you from the beginning, for me at least. It's exactly what I want in a fantasy. It's fast-paced. We have grey characters, which I'm so weak for. And also the military strategy sort of thing. This book and this series is what made me realize that I really like strategy, military sorts of fantasies. This story is about Rin. She is a war orphan that lives in a small village, and she's about to be married off to some 30-year-old dude that she doesn't want to marry, and her only way out is to ace this exam called the KU, because if she manages to do that, she will enter Synegard, which is the Empire's military academy. And she does manage to do that. Like, it happens in the first chapter. It's no surprise. Like, it's on the backside of the book. So she enters this military academy when just things start to happen. Many might pitch this as a magical school trope book. It's not. It's that for about 200 pages. and then it turns into something different. Just keep in mind that there's war in the title. Things will go down. It's so interesting for me now rereading this, seeing Rin's journey throughout the books. She just constantly grows and develops in so many ways. And when this book starts, she's 16. And it's so cool to see her and read about her again. Even at 16, she is so freaking determined. She wants out. She wants a better life for herself. She wants to make her own decisions. And she's not afraid to stand up for her opinions and her rights. But also, she's so young. She's so naive. She doesn't know what's to come for her. My heart is just aching for Rin, especially young Rin. And I loved meeting all of the characters again, Kitay, Alton, and just rereading this with a different perspective and seeing how much is actually foreshadowed in the book, both for the book itself but also for the entire series. And I actually tried to tab it this time. I did not tab it the first time I read it. So I tabbed it and I wrote in it, and I had a really good time doing that. Also, this one is heavily inspired by actual events, historical events. There's a lot of parallels to China's first emperor. The different empires and federations are compared to China, Japan, the Western countries. Also, Rin is inspired by historical characters. The other characters and students at the military school are inspired by historical characters. There's so much, and it's so important to read. And it also discusses some very difficult issues about racism and society and being a woman, and it does a great job of bringing up a lot of different subjects. I'm so happy to be reading these books again. I've been so excited about it. I honestly was not even afraid that this wouldn't live up to my expectations. I knew that this would be a 5-star again, and I'm so excited to read Dragon Republic and The Burning God and to have my heart broken again. Let's talk about some other books I read in January. The second book I finished in January was A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I listened to this one as an audiobook. It is a very short sci-fi novella. It's part of a series called The Monk and the Robot. And I was skeptical about this. I've heard only great things about this book, so I knew I would probably enjoy it. But I was still skeptical because I didn't quite understand the story. I feel like the title is really long. At first when I saw it, I was not the biggest fan of the cover, but since when I've looked more closely at the cover, I actually really like it. But yeah, I was a bit skeptical. I did not expect that much going into it. And the audiobook is quite short. I think it's about 3 or 4 hours, which sometimes is not enough time for you to grow attached to the story, the characters, the book. I was proven wrong, thankfully. This book is so good. It's sweet, it's wholesome, it's hopeful, it's a good time. This book follows Dex. Dex is a non-binary tea monk. They're just a tea monk that are trying to learn and trying to travel the world and trying to figure out, why am I who I am? What am I supposed to do with my life? I don't know even how to explain Dex, but Dex is just adorable in many ways. And Dex, on one of his adventures, walks, something like that. It's been a while since I read the book. On one of their walks, Dex meets a robot whose name I definitely do not remember because it's a freaking long name. The robot basically asks, what does human need? And the two of them go on this quest together to figure that out. Dex is like, well, I'm only one person. I can't answer that. My answer will be different from everyone else's. And also, I don't even know what I want, so how can I answer for the entire human race? It's wholesome. It's like a very positive and optimistic view of the future that I really appreciate. And they have a lot of good conversations about everything from like depression and not being able to explain why you feel a certain way, and also just figuring out what you want out of life and what you enjoy. And it's so good. The queer rep is amazing. As I said, Dex is a non-binary character. They call Dex sibling because of course they can't really call them brother or sister. When they first meet, Dex and the robot, Dex asks the robot, do you have a gender? And I feel like that's just such a good question that I sort of want to use in my everyday life when I interact with people. To ask someone if they even consider if they have a gender. That's such a, that blowed my mind for some freaking reason. Great queer rep, wholesome, sweet story, lot of good reflections, lot of good quotes, sweet characters, and there's a sequel coming out this summer that I'm so excited about. And I listened to this one as an audiobook, and a part of me wants to get it because I want to reread it and annotate it, and that is so not the purpose of why I'm listening to audiobooks, because the reason why I'm listening to audiobooks and reading ebooks and borrowing books from the library is so that I won't need to purchase it. But now I feel like with some of the books I read this month, I want to purchase them so I can reread them and annotate them and like tab all the quotes I loved. Another book I read in January was Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. Another book I really enjoyed. It's a very interesting and different one. This story follows a transgender woman, a man who used to be a transgender woman but then detransitioned, and the cis woman that he got pregnant. So those are the three main characters. They are on this journey to figure out this pregnancy. And there's just a lot of discussions and reflections about womanhood, motherhood, parenthood, fatherhood, all of those things, as they are sort of trying to orient themselves in how should we approach this pregnancy, what roles should we have, what roles can we have, what are we comfortable with. We're also learning a lot about our main characters, the two queer characters. We have Reese, who is the transgender woman, and then Ames, who's the detransition man. We're learning a lot about their story, how they became who they are, how they met, their relationship before everything that's going on in present times. And this book is also written by a transgender author, which I feel like is some sort of indication that the representation is fairly good, at least. Not that it can reflect everyone's experience, of course, but I trust a transgender writer who writes transgender characters more than I would trust a cis writer who writes trans characters. It can seem a bit controversial and extreme in many ways. The main character, Reese, definitely has some opinions and has some life experiences and just ways to approach life that perhaps not everyone would agree with, and that might in some ways also be considered to be quite damaging to transgender people and the transgender community. But her reasoning behind so many of her own opinions, thoughts, her preferences, they make such sense. And I could definitely relate to so many of her views regarding womanhood, being in a relationship, wanting to be desired, to be liked. There's so much insecurity in all of that, but it makes it so human and relatable. Sometimes it can be a bit too much, this book. There's a lot of talk about sex, about their sex lives, a lot of things going in depth about their sex and sex lives that you perhaps don't really need. I really enjoyed this book. And this is another one of those books that I feel like, even though I borrowed it from the library and have now returned it, I kind of want to purchase it so I can reread it and highlight some things, because there are some quotes in this one that made me go damn, that's hitting something in me. I ended up giving it 4 stars, very solid read, and I highly recommend it. I also read an arc in January. Who would have thought? I actually read the arc that I had randomized for me to read, so that is indeed very great. The arc I read is The Island House by Amanda Brittney. It was actually already released last year. I'm just late with my arcs as always. This is a thriller mystery that takes place in UK, I think, and we're following a girl whose father just deceased, and she sort of learns about this hotel that apparently were a fan of her father's books, and she is invited to stay at this hotel. And the hotel is at a remote island. She goes there, a few of her friends goes there together with her, and also there are some other guests at this hotel. And then things start to happen. Basically, isolated island, creepy hotel, something family drama. I was surprised by the fact that I really enjoyed this book, actually. The more I think about it, yeah, it was a pretty solid thriller for me. I'm still figuring out what sorts of thrillers and mysteries I enjoy. I have not really read that many. I feel like most of them sort of bore me, or they don't really keep me on my toes, or sometimes you can just figure out what's gonna happen and it's not as exciting. I want curveballs. I want to be kept on my toes. I want a feeling of a bit of a creepy thing. I want to not be entirely comfortable when I read a thriller, mystery, horror sort of book. And this book definitely delivered at that. There were some things, I think even in the first or second chapter, where I was like, okay, that's creepy. At first they're setting up the characters, they're setting up the story, then they get to the hotel and things get a tad bit more interesting. You're like, something's gonna happen here, this is fun. And then about halfway through the book, I feel like events were just sped up. There were too many major things going on and too many twists and too much just like freaking out and going wrong. And I'm not really a fan of when everything culminates at the same time and things happen at the same time. Like it felt a bit too much, like the writer was a bit rushed and wanted to make some sort of statement of being like epic and grand and wow, how could they do this? It felt a bit too forced, I guess. But I was so impressed by the fact that the author actually managed to reel everything back in for the final half of the book. Like, we slowed down, we got to the nitty-gritty. I liked the ending, actually. I was surprised by that. I really did like the ending and like how the story developed. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars, actually. Like, it impressed me. It's one of the better thrillers I read. As I said, I'm still figuring out what sort of thrillers and mysteries I enjoy. So if you have any recommendations, please share them, because I would love to hear about it. The second thriller I read in January was The Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. Yes, I only picked this one up because of the cover. It screams Hawaii, tropical island, and I just love that setting. I want to live at a tropical island. You haven't really seen them in a while, but I have a huge collection of what I call my ugly Hawaii shirts. I have a huge collection of those and I need to start wearing them again for spring, I feel like. Definitely a cover pickup. I listened to this one as an audiobook. This is about a girl who moved to Hawaii to stay with her boyfriend because he had promised them that they would travel the world together on his boat. But then the boat broke down and they were stuck at Hawaii and she needed to become a cleaner at a hotel. An opportunity arises and the couple, together with two girls, get to travel to this remote island where they meet some more people. Does this setup sound familiar? They go to a remote island where there is like this huge yacht and a man and his girlfriend. So there's 6 people now at the island, I think. Yeah, there's 6 people now at the island and they're just having fun. They're exploring, they're having a good time. And then things start to happen. The thing with this one is I'm a sucker for the setting. I did really like the main character. I just liked her opinions. I could relate to her. I thought, like, yeah, she was pretty solid. Like a good, reasonable character. So I did like her. It didn't really creep me out in the same way as the Island House did. While I never really got the same sort of creepiness vibes for this book. My review for Reckless Girls was basically that I really enjoyed the setting and the premise, and I also really liked the main character, but I missed a creepy and mysterious atmosphere. Nothing really kept me on my toes. I wasn't really sure how I felt about the ending. I felt like there were many other ways that the story could have gone and the story could have been explored, and that would have been more intriguing. The final conflict and the whys felt pretty meh, but I did appreciate the epilogue. And I feel like that summarizes my thoughts pretty well. And those are all the books I read in January. I love looking at this little stack. Doesn't it look nice with all of the tabs? For me, I feel like January was a really good start to the year. I started some new series I've been excited about for a while. I started my reread of Poppy War that I've been meaning to do for so long. And I've been more in a tabbing mood as of recently as well. I listened to some great audiobooks. I even read a 2022 release. I read a bunch of 2021 releases. January was just a very solid month, and I do feel like February will also be a very good reading month. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye!
You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what